All right, guys, this is the moment which we've all been waiting for. I get to sit down in person with Thomas Emerson. So for those who've been following on the Passive Hang journey, would already know that we've connected twice already on some previous episodes. And if you haven't watched that before, or no, not watched, I guess you're watching this, but if you haven't listened to those before, I highly recommend those. But we'll be going through a bit of context and backstory again for those who are joining us for the first time. But yeah, it's been a wonderful experience for myself, and I was joined with Ben, who's sitting over there, to meet Thomas for the first time in person and visit this lovely Praksis space as well. So I just want to start off by saying thank you for being such a great host for us for this wonderful weekend.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely welcome. It's been awesome having you guys here and getting that extra energy boost of people who are coming and visiting specifically to practice here and come and see us, and that's always a special thing. So it's been great, and being able to spend some time in person and chat more and more casual ways and just free flow ways, and also more importantly to practice together and move together. That's been great. So yeah,
I think one of the wonderful things that going deeper into, I guess, any interest or hobby, you know, when you start realizing, oh, okay, it's not just for me, although it is like very self-nourishing, but then you go to an interest group, or you go to, like, maybe it's a Facebook group meetup, and then you're like, oh, like I can talk the same sort of trade now with this thing that I think sometimes when you find something new, you try to share that with your friends, but they haven't gone on the same journey as you. And so when you try to talk about, oh, I found this great thing, this movement thing, you know, there's this guy that's doing lizard walks or whatever, right? And they're just like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
And even when sometimes you might show them the video as well, they don't quite get it, or it just doesn't resonate with them. And then so I find it really wonderful that there's a place like this where you've gathered so many people of shared interest, shared values as well. And no matter who we were talking with, we could relate to on some really nice level, like almost an old friend type of energy.
Yeah, you don't have to establish a shared understanding at the beginning of every conversation. It's there already. And perhaps some of the language or the jargon is shared, and more importantly than all of that, there are shared experiences that you're touching on together. That makes the communication different, right?
Yeah.
And at least my experience in the last few days with our conversations has been that the questions are like just endless. So anyone who knows me knows that I like to talk. So that's nice. That's been nice, enjoyable for me, and just really, really easy. And yeah, there's always this kind of layering, right? Use the metaphor of rereading an old book and then rereading it again and rereading it again, and that's been unfolding for us, which has been nice.
So, I mean, to recap this weekend, which is, you guys have described it to us as we've almost gone on this self-intensive, which my body is feeling it in that way. So we started off with the first day. I think we opened up with your movement practice being led by yourself, and then we went into some mobility work. Day 2 was where we were exposed to your riverside training, which I want to go through as well through our chat.
Yeah.
And
Not
then,
so much mine, more something I join in on that's led by other people, which is great.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it was a really, really interesting and powerful experience. And then in the evening, we got to be guided by Soshi as well through her style of movement practice and her approach to handstands. On Saturday was you again in the morning, followed by Simon Thakur, bringing us through a 6-hour Capoeira Angola workshop, which I thought was introduced really brilliantly to a group of people who are new to Capoeira. So I think that would be a big challenge dealing with such a big group, because normally when you're a Capoeira teacher, I think you only have to deal with like 1 or 2 type of newcomers, right? Not a whole big group of 20 or 30. So I really love the way in which he introduced that to us. And then just to cap off the final day, we're led by Soshi again for, well, now you guys are going to break for the the Christmas and the New Year as well. So I think,
Yeah, so you've done a handstand class with Soishi, one with me, 2 movement practice classes with me, 2 with Soishi,
2, yep.
1 mobility class with me, and a 6-hour Capoeira workshop. And it's been less than 4 days,
So
plus driving from Melbourne.
not too bad, not too bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been good.
And I think when Ben and I were debriefing every night, we were really enjoying, I think, the different type of teaching styles and communication styles that one like you or Soshi adopt. Didn't get to, this time around, get some coaching from Thomas Langley, the other coach here, but looking forward to maybe another trip to be exposed to that, and even Simon's way of teaching. And I wanted to ask you about how you open up the space for these other teachers in terms of the mutual understanding, or maybe the agreement that you have, where, I don't know if you just say, just go for it, just do whatever you do, or you say, okay, be mindful of this, or you shouldn't do this. So what is that conversation?
Yeah, that's been a challenge for me, for sure. I was, for the first 2 years before we moved into this space, which was around 12 months ago, a little more than 12 months ago, it was my project. And I was deliberate when we moved here and saying to myself and to the other people involved, no, this needs to now be our project. Perhaps later we can talk about the reasons for that. And that's difficult, because part of that process is teasing apart what are the elements of what are the idiosyncrasies of my personality, my temperament, that are infused in the project and into the community, that are actually not necessary given the work we're trying to do and given the ways in which we're trying to help people. Teasing that, separating that from, well, what are actually the core values that do matter? Because you don't want to just float around and reach out to everyone and then have no central shared values. I think that's unsustainable. It can work in the beginning if you're trying to reach a lot of people, but then you don't know what you're doing and they don't know what you're doing either, and it's there's no heart there. So that's been a challenging process for me. I think what the 3 teachers here share is a belief that it starts with the practice and it starts with doing the work yourself, that you can make your little part of the world a little bit better by making yourself a little bit better. That self-work, it can sound woo-woo, but it's just like, yeah, if I want things around me to be organized in a better way, to be arranged in a better way, and that might be small scale in the sense of my family, or it might be a larger scale, the sense of this community here, or perhaps even I'm thinking about Canberra as a town. Can we make that a better place? It's got to start with making yourself a little bit better. So we all have that really strong grounding in the practice, in doing the work ourselves, and then trying to share those, whatever insights or experiences we've had so far, with others in a less prescriptive way, right? Like acknowledging that everyone else is on their own path and that they can engage for different reasons and at different times, in different amounts of time, different volumes, but not broadening things so wide that now we're offering something we didn't want to offer. So honesty is really key amongst the teachers, and then between the teachers and students, not letting bullshit proliferate out of our mouths or out of theirs, out of anyone's mouths, like saying, actually, I think that's something you need to pay attention to. Are you sure you're being honest with yourself there, or being honest with us? And you see that immediately. People come in and there's like real, genuine, honest feedback from day one about, well, this is not being done the way we'd like it to be done. And this is where you are. And that's probably the second part of it, is that acceptance of wherever people are at now, meeting them where they are, and genuinely wanting to help them get to a new place that's going to be best for them. That's the hard thing, like not what's going to be best for me, which might be having a large group of students who can do impressive things and that helps build my reputation. It's like, what's going to be best for you? And that's a collaborative process. My personal experience as a practitioner of movement and general explorations, and then my experience as a teacher, has been one of creating a space for that conversation, because most of us don't actually think about what's best for us or what would be best for us. And it's very easy when someone comes in that confused state, or perhaps just a state where they haven't had the time or a chance, it's not so much their fault, it's not an act of omission, a commission so much as an act of omission, to not just immediately fill that space with my preferences. Oh, well, I want you to spend all your time training movement and these particular types of movement. But to just create a space where that conversation can happen, and having the different teachers dropping in their perspectives and creating space for conversations with Tom, with Soishi, with myself, I think helps keep the ego away a little bit, because I might be encouraging more discipline for a person, and in the same moment, Soishi might be warning about self-hatred, or kind of punishing yourself with the training. And so they have that more nuanced perspective immediately, rather than having to make lots of mistakes to develop it. Those things have to happen regardless. But yeah, that's been really nice to see, and also as a way of like rounding out and balancing my perspective and my approach to see, there's value to that perspective. I need to take that on board. Again, like I said, while sharing this belief that we have to change our habits, change the ways that we're doing things, the things that we repeat are the things, that's what we become. Those things really matter. So trying to make those small scale changes, doing that in an honest way, and doing it in a way where, as best you can, you're really trying to orient towards the students, not toward yourself.
I think what really struck me on the first day especially was how Thomas Langley was joining in on your class, and then when we were doing Soishi's class on Friday evening, you joined in as well. And that felt really nice, because I was like, I was being led by you yesterday, but now we're practicing together. And there was just, I can't really describe the feeling, but it just kind of changed a little bit of the perspective or my perception of you, because you were playing the role of the teacher, and then suddenly you became this peer. But instead of like downgrading you in the hierarchy or anything, I just felt more connected. And I was like, okay, like Tom's just trying to figure this stuff out as well, because we were doing handstands at the time. There was a new movement that I think you hadn't done before, like the crow to handstand. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, you've never done that before, and now we're doing this together. But on the other side, like I've walked in and you're practicing like the one-arm handstand. So then it kind of demystifies this scope, I think, of you're like the all-knowing teacher who knows all the secrets, and that's the voice I should be paying attention to. Sort of like how you were saying this dichotomy between the discipline and self-hatred. It's really nice in this way to hear different viewpoints, and then to hear that you are also, or to see that you are also the student, and you're practicing amongst the other students. So with that, with the other teachers as well, is that just you just lead by doing that, and then they've done that as well? Or is that also just because you've selected, say, these other two teachers because you know that they're so enthusiastic about movement, and so when this content is being offered as well, they're naturally just drawn into to involve themselves in with the other teachers' teachings? Because other gyms, I think I've seen, normally the teacher just comes in, coaches their session, then just goes, right? That's it. It's quite a different way that I've seen it operate here.
Yeah, it's something I'd love to do more of, and that I think all three of us would love to do more of. That can just be hard with scheduling, because of course it's either your time on in terms of teaching or your time off, and if you're spending some of that time off training, of course other things are sacrificed to that, right? So it's probably happening less than I'd like it to happen. But we all started as students and remain students first. I think that's really key, because it is an unfair position to be in to some extent. When I'm teaching, I'm not going to choose material that I've not practiced. Some people will do that, which can be great, but I think there's a little bit of I feel a lack of integrity if I'm trying to teach something that I've not practiced enough myself. Some things it's hard because it's partner work, and it's hard to do that stuff on your own. But being able to put myself into the position of being the student, it is partly not so much something that I'm modeling for the other teachers, but something that we're all modeling for the other students. This is how we try to be good students. This is what that looks like. To see, so we had Simon's workshop today, and we were all students joining in on that, and to see, how does, there were moments where Soishi was used for a demonstration, when I was used for a demonstration, where we weren't just getting it immediately because there's new material for us. For the group to see, how do they deal with that? And to see that there are things most things that we don't know, that we've not been exposed to. Like you said, you're kind of peeking behind the curtain and seeing the process at play, seeing it in work. Because I can tell those stories of, I used to be terrified of kicking up into a handstand, and they're true stories, but you come in and see a one-arm handstand, and it's like so far away from the present moment that it just feels like maybe you're just telling us that. We had this with Tom, because he used to be overweight, and he's been doing nutritional coaching for people, where some people, some old friends of his actually thought he was lying on the website about having been overweight, because they'd never known him when he was. So those stories become more real when someone sees them happening in person, right? Like sees, this is what it's like for you to be a student as well. Of course, you're choosing material that you're familiar with and comfortable with, but for me, the whole practice has always been, or at least is now and continues to be, about engaging in those different modes. What's it like to be leading a group and deciding what's done, and then what's it like to make no decisions and follow, and what's it like to learn, what's it like to teach. Getting that balance right is really difficult. And I just love that. I love being in that mode, that learning mode, just trying to soak up as much as possible. So I wouldn't say that that we chose the other two teachers we have here. It's hard to say whether that was the reason. I can't see myself we were talking recently about, it wouldn't be bad to have another person on board for if one of us wants to go away for a week to a workshop or an intensive retreat or something. And then you go, man, okay, well, if we were going to try to train someone up, that's like years of required practice to make that possible. I mean, Tom started practicing with me over 3 years ago before we opened the first studio. And so having him come on board was like, I know the work ethic's there, and I know that he's going through challenges. He's not just talented and picking this stuff up easy. It's hard for him. Lots of the things that we work on, and that makes him a better teacher. There's that integrity there, knowing people come to morning classes, which Tom's responsible for, through the week, and they might do 2 classes in a row, and that's 2 hours, 15 minutes of practice, and that's a solid chunk. And then Tom does 4 hours of practice in that day after having taught, or 5 or 6 hours, depending on the day. And there's just such a solid base there. So for sure, that's a reason that he's teaching here, is the amount of practice. I just don't think you can. You're using other people's words if you're trying to teach something you haven't practiced enough, and people can sense that if it's not embodied. We had a conversation about that, the three of us, about the importance of the demonstrations. We do Simon's workshop, and he's talking about oozing weight from side to side and forward and backward, and using the movements as a relaxation task. And you can see that he's doing it. He could say none of those things, and if you paid really close attention and just tried to imitate, you'd have that experience. But if he just heard that from his Capoeira teacher yesterday, and then today he's trying to teach us, it's like unearned wisdom.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the unspoken
Yeah.
You can see it, even though they're saying it. You're kind of like, there's something that's not quite right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're drawn to harmony. Like, that's what beauty is, right? We're drawn to authenticity, where the layers are synced up and what you're saying is clearly there in what you're doing. And without enough time doing the thing that you're trying to teach, that's just not possible to achieve that.
So I wanted to actually return back to this question, which I might have asked you in the first episode, which was about how do you describe what you're doing here? Because as I walked through, I looked at the flyer that you have at the front of the door, where it's like, this is a dedicated movement studio. I like the terminology studio rather than gym as well. But now that I've kind of been in Canberra, I've met the people in here, I met some of your friends as well. There was this kind of feeling that they're kind of getting what movement is, which I think we keep on struggling to define, what is a movement practice as well. So yeah, I wanted to challenge you with that question again, which is like, what do you do here at Praksis?
I think it's different for different people and for different teachers, and it's changing over time. We say that the shared intention across the classes, and regardless of who's participating, is to improve your experience of embodiment. I think that's a general enough definition to capture everything. And it's to improve that for your sake primarily first, right? Because in many gyms, let's say, the intention is to improve your body, but maybe it's not for the sake of the experience of that body. It's not for your sake. It's for the sake of what that body can do for you, how that body looks for other people, how it can serve you in all these other ways, but still it's a servant under that definition or under that conception. So I think explicitly that's what we're doing. But for me, I want it to reach beyond that, where it's something that the practice is something that connects me, not just connects me to my body, right? But also connects me to the students and connects me to the other teachers, connects me to my community. Seeking connection connects me to myself in the most, let's say, hopefully most profound sense, where I'm noticing, well, when I'm training and I'm trying to do something new that I can't do yet, how do I respond to that? What's my narrative in those moments? How do I approach challenges? We spoke about this a little bit as a group. We're lucky to be based in Canberra, where COVID's not, it's been well under control from the beginning. But when it first arose as a challenge here and we were required to close the studio, I decided, we choose all our own challenges. Like, I'm going to learn a one-arm handstand, and that's a challenge. And that's a serious challenge to take on. And there are all these negative emotions and struggles that you go through, and of course growth that comes from that. Growth beyond being able to do the skill, which is what matters in my mind. It's not the skill, it's the growth that comes with it, the personal growth, So then I said to the group, well, why don't we just view COVID in the same way? This is a challenge we didn't choose, but maybe we can grow from it as well by trying to face it. And again, it's not about necessarily overcoming, because it's something it's mostly out of our control. Overcoming the challenge, it's not about the result of the particular challenge, but it's like, what the mountain makes of the man, right? So I think that's what we're trying to do, is to push ourselves, to stress ourselves in different ways, to nudge, can you be still? And in the next moment, can you move quickly? And you see for yourself, no, I can't. What am I missing out on because I can't do those things? What am I missing out? What parts of myself haven't been developed or realized or cultivated because of a failure to engage in those different states? For me, that's what the practice is serving ultimately. It's a movement practice, but it's a self practice above that and beneath that. And if the movement practice, if the results of it are just impressive skills, which is what people see from the outside, who cares? You're going to lose those things. And who cares if I can do a handstand push-up or squat however many times my body weight if when my family needs help, I'm too busy training. That's not the person I want to be. So it's just bringing attention to that. Like I said before, asking those questions. Well, what kind of person do you want to be? And what tools do we have to help you become that person? And sprinkling in a little bit of maybe notice that when we're playing with this kind of combative martial type of movement, that anxiety that comes into your body. Notice if that state also arises next time you're required to resolve a dispute with your partner or at work. Do you have that same response? And perhaps the tools that we're sharing allow you to deal with that difficulty, with that challenge, in the same way that they do with the physical challenge.
So you mentioned something, I think, when we were driving in the car together, which was really nice, which was saying that you don't want to orientate yourself towards serving the movement, but you would like for the movement to help serve your life. And I really liked the way that was put, because sometimes I also question in my training, when you're deep in the training program sometimes and you're like, I really need to do this stuff, that maybe Hannah, my daughter in the other room, is by herself just playing alone. And I might question myself going like, oh, well, what am I really doing here as well? Like, should I be training or should I actually be just spending time with her at the moment? And that was kind of like with your example with the family as well. So yeah, maybe personally, how do you normally deal with that as well? Because I guess this is your work. You have a movement studio. You're the owner. You coach here, so that's also your livelihood. So and as you said, the practice is one of the key important parts of being a teacher. But then outside of that as well, you have this life. So when your grandma calls or something like that, how have you found that you've been able to manage that so that you pay respect to both sides?
Yeah, I don't know if I've succeeded, I'm trying. I'm definitely more aware of it now than I was, say, 2 or 3 years ago. And I mean, you said I don't want to serve the movement, I want it to serve me, but I want me to serve other people. That's got to be there too, right? So the ways in which it's serving me need to also become a source of value for the people around me. So that's been something that I've oriented more toward in the last perhaps 12 months, is not knowing, but asking, which is more important, which of the things I'm doing are in some way feeding those concentric circles outside of me, away from me, and which of the things am I doing that are just, selfish and just for me, which is a very difficult question to answer. I think it's important to go through a stage of, I found it useful to go through a stage of selfish discipline, because people think of disciplining and sticking to an incredibly regimented lifestyle as, wow, how did you have that in you? That's something that's hard for you, and it is, but it's much harder for the people around you. When you're like, if I'm training, I'm not answering the phone. The phone's off, and I'm doing these hours of practice no matter what. And everything else has to fit in around that. I think it's important to decide for yourself which person you want to be, what your top priority is. And I've gone through a bit of a process of that. Like when I was finishing my degree, my top priority was my studies, and my training came second to that. And then when I finished, my training became my top priority, and the hours and the effort that was going into that increased. And even when I opened the studio, my training was still top priority for a while. And then in the last maybe year or two, probably last 2 years, it's shifted more toward, well, now my top priority is what we're doing here at Praksis. It's the community, it's the students, how I'm able to serve them, which means if I'm training right before teaching, I don't go to the same limits as I used to, because I want to have extra energy for the class. I don't want to use it all up on my own practice. I want to be able to put everything into every single class. So I think I'm still at the stage of exploring what that's like and what the effects of that are. because that's always what it is. It's a research process. What are the effects of, this is the question, what are the effects when I invest the majority of my energy in this? And you do that for a time, and then you see the effects, and you can see the positive effects, and hopefully you also get some perspective and see the negative effects, right? By pulling yourself away from that routine, which I'm looking forward to over the next couple of weeks to see what mistakes I've been making. It's very hard to know when you're in it. But you don't want to be just changing constantly. Your priorities each day are shifting, you know. And I can see for myself, the next thing is family. That's going to be my next priority, I imagine. And it will be interesting for me to see. I don't know how does your life change when that becomes your top thing. The other things don't disappear, right? They're still there. But if you're claiming that, you see this with men a lot, right? Where they claim that their family that's what they care about most. I'm a family man, right? Define yourself that way. And they'll sacrifice all sorts of potential positive and meaningful family interactions to their career, and then tell themselves that the career is serving the family. I'm a provider, right? The career is serving my family. And maybe there's not truth in that. Maybe there's not honesty in that. For me, that's the process, is letting those, you just get these messages, like the intuitive, you need to shift your orientation. Why are you focusing so much on this? And they can come in different forms. Someone you care about mentioning something, just saying, hey, you know, you're not here for us. Or maybe it's just a subtle, it's always these, like, more often it's not a general thing like that. It's just one moment where you realize, oh, so-and-so needed me and I wasn't there. That can become a little trigger moment for a complete shift in your orientation. So trying to listen to those and create space for them from time to time, but not every single day, where every day you wake up and go, well, what's my, which guy am I now? You don't want that to happen. So yeah, it's an unfolding process for me. Curious to see where it leads. I don't think you ever finish.
No, I don't think so either. And I'm excited to hear if that's your next stage with family, because speaking from experience, that's right. Like one of the biggest challenges. And as you said, like those narratives and like, why am I doing this? Is it for the family? Is it for myself? It's like a constant struggle and a challenge as well. So what I wanted to ask you about as well, about the development of Praksis, is what are you trying to achieve in terms of the change that you're trying to help with the community at a broader sort of scale? Because you mentioned when you first started Praksis, it was just outside of your garage gym. And I suppose at some sort of stage, if you have enough clients, like, you know, one-on-one, that's enough to sustain yourself, right? Like you can just keep on doing that same thing. And then you mentioned before you came into this beautiful space, how you were in another space. So you kind of already had this space and this business that was probably sustaining you enough. So what have you gone through in your mind in terms of consciously, in terms of like investing into a larger sort of space? This is kind of like signposting in the ground, like, you know, I'm doing this thing, and people walking past, they're looking in and maybe they're questioning what's happening here. But from here, because you have this space as well, what is the ongoing change that you are committed to in terms of sharing with the community?
Yeah, it's a I don't know. I don't know. That's what I like about it. It's just like an interest in what's possible. That's what I'm driven by, a curiosity for. So yeah, I've been able to sustain myself financially for 3 years doing what I'm doing. It wasn't long after we opened the first studio that was the case. So then you go, well, okay, that box is ticked. And like I learned long before that money is not something that, lots and lots of money is not something that excites me. It's an easy thing to say when you have enough, you know, so I'm not dismissive of it completely, but just wealth is not something that I'm pursuing as a top priority, right? So immediately then the question becomes, well, what am I pursuing? Moving into this space was driven by knowing that there was more we could do for this project, the Praksis project, that the space we were in was not home for that potential, could not be home for that potential. So I just kind of asked myself, what would it look like if we were to go to the next step? And you come up with all these possible iterations, like maybe we could have gone and leased the space twice the size and paid twice the rent, and maybe that would have actually worked out as well, I don't know. And then other options which were a little more conservative, and for me it just felt like this step was a reasonable one to take. And then I wanted to see, well, what does a movement space that you try to make beautiful as well as functional look like? What does it feel like? What is a movement community with multiple people kind of at the helm, multiple teachers, bringing different perspectives and really sinking their teeth into it and making it their life's work? What does that look like? And that's what we're aiming, what we're moving toward with Tom and Soishi, becoming closer and closer to full-time. Well, I mean, they don't do other work anyway, but you know, that's where we're angling. What's it like if you have 3 people focusing a lot of their efforts into the same project? But they're more questions than answers, you know. It's like pulling on the thread. It's an unraveling, a process that we're engaged in. I know I was even speaking with your wife before, Amy, about, well, how did you design, who designed the studio? And it was me, but it wasn't something that I wrote down and designed, like, this is the drawing and this is where everything's gone. It was more, oh, well, we need a space to lift weights. Okay, so we'll look at the flooring options and how big of a space, well, I don't know, you know, and then we need lighting. Well, what's that gonna look like? And we need a handstand wall, and how big does that need to be? And more just like, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, and it's continuous, like the project is never finished. I'm driven by that because I look around and see, well, this would be better. This little thing would clearly be better if we made this tiny change. And this little thing would be better if we made that tiny change. And then you kind of open that awareness out, and it's like, well, how much better could this thing be if we made all of the changes? You know, that's something I've been thinking about recently. What if everyone just made all the changes they know they should make?
That's
you know, it's not like it's not that we need to figure out what needs fixing so much. We kind of see that around us. If we're paying attention and looking at the world in that way, how could things be a little bit better? And then just immediately going about making them a little bit better. It's a fun project. I'm excited by that. I think about the future, and I'm like, I think about possibility and I'm excited. You're anxious, yeah? Possibility also makes you anxious and afraid perhaps, but mostly it's exciting for me. And that's a fun project. Like, I'm just trying to see how long I can get away with approaching things in that way, not in a way that's like afraid of what could go wrong, and conservative, but more reaching out. So, I mean, to answer your question perhaps a little bit more concretely, what am I hoping will happen here in this space? We're looking together as a team at how we can make it not just a movement facility, but a genuine community space, a genuine community center where people will come to practice. You know, we spoke about this. Well, why start with the movement? Well, everyone already accepts that training is something they should do. There's already a culture of fitness at a minimum. Everyone, it's the same thing, like, oh, what should you be doing that you're not? Anyone who's not doing some sort of physical exercise knows already, at least in Australia, you know, we have a strong culture of that they should be moving, they should be doing something. So you don't have to, there's not a big gap to bridge there. So that's where we've started and that's what we're doing, but I'd like to see us move more toward, well, what if I try to clarify my way of thinking about the world? Can I improve my ability to think through things logically and from multiple perspectives, and to have reasoned discussions with the people around me and figure out what their perspective is and come to resolutions? Soishi's teaching online meditation classes every weekday. That's a huge one, right? Like, how can I be more aware of the things that are arising here as they arise and be less reactive perhaps? And then Tom's working on the nutritional front, helping people develop a healthier relationship with eating, not by telling them what to eat, but by giving them skills and tools to learn what to eat and how to eat and when to eat themselves. What other questions are there? How should I be managing my finances? Why aren't we talking about that? I don't know. How could I be more honest in my relationships and have healthier relationships with my friends and family, and in my relationships, romantic relationships? Like, there's just infinite potential to improve our lives in very simple ways. And I'd like to see how can we go about sharing some of those ways, and that, again, it not be just top down, because there are so many ways in which I'm flawed and ways in which I'm failing, that I'm not the nutritional guy. Someone else has got more understanding and experience in that domain. And we have a couple of students who grow their own food from home. And so maybe we can have them educating us on how to go about doing that. So I'm interested to see what are the other categories that we're missing and that we could add to help the people here and help ourselves become better human beings.
That sounds very exciting.
Yeah, it's daunting. It's a big project. Yeah. But I don't see it ending,
Because one of the questions that I wanted to ask was like, what was the scope of ongoing work from here? Because Ben and I have had this wonderful weekend. Something we wanted to ask as well is like, was this a true representation of what happens here at Praksis? But from here, it was kind of like, you have this space, you have this thriving community, you have these engaged teachers, engaged students. You could just keep on continuing like this for years, right? And it's not such a bad outcome. It's really doing something. So with what you just mentioned there as well, I found that really, really interesting, because then it really does open that scope out wider than potentially what it says on the flyer right now, which is about this movement studio, right? Like studio for anything, right. for practice.
Exactly.
Right? So that is really exciting to hear, I think. And I don't know how you're going to start off with really broadening.
Me neither. Yeah, I don't know. That's the hard thing. Like I said, people accept the structure of a class. You come and you train for an hour and then you leave. That's an agreed upon entity. That's an agreed upon offering that exists. So you don't have to explain how that works. But I don't know what it looks like for us to meet and figure out how to think through things a little more clearly. I don't know. It's more a logistical question. What's the process there for developing those skills that are perhaps more important than the movement skills or equally important? But there are plenty, and also not limiting it to the scope of what I've explored is important to me as well. And for me, I'm in a stage of asking myself, because for such a long, since Praksis started, it's been like identify completely with it. So are these just projects for me to sink my teeth into, or are they things that are for Praksis? I'd like them to be things for Praksis, because I like coming here and being able to share the things that I've been working on and developing and that I'm interested in and curious about. But yeah, it's I really don't know how we're going to structure that, how that would look. I think a good way to begin is to start with I already drop in these sorts of conversations into class. I'm always already pointing in different directions with using the material that we're practicing here, the movements that we're practicing here, or the tasks as kind of analogies for other things that are happening in our lives. And I'm just kind of hoping that will have people shift their attention in those directions. And it does with some of the students. But it doesn't with others, because it's not as explicit. So just starting with those conversations perhaps, and starting with some more informal stuff. Let's go visit a farm together and see how food is grown, see where our food comes from. But then how does it become a process where you're genuinely following something that's going to work and make you into someone, and make you into a better version of yourself? I'm really not sure, man. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
And it's sounding like, the Praksis is becoming something more than just yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing I wanted to ask was, how do you feel at this moment without your presence? Is there a Praksis without Thomas Emerson?
I mean, I would hope so. I think people would be really upset if we just closed, if I just left. I was very aware of starting the project that, especially when we moved from here, so that first space was a 2-year, we had a 2-year lease, that was like an experiment. Let's see if this is something that can happen. Is there a space, is there a hole, an empty void for a movement studio in Canberra of some sort? And there is. But through that, even that first year, I started seeing, man, I just am so grateful and feel honored that people, someone's working a full-time job and then coming to class after that, or coming to class before and after that. And maybe they also have a family. They have all these responsibilities and they're choosing to spend that time here. It's like quite an honor for people to decide that. And it's easy to lose sight of that because it's my thing, it is my work. So there's not so much that divorce. But I have been increasingly aware of the fact that I'm creating a responsibility for myself, not to just go, I think I'm gonna get into engineering instead. To just completely shift away. You plant roots, you don't just tear them out, and it's not just up to you. We have this idea in our culture that you should be independent and free, and that you can just follow your bliss. And it's like, well, what are you missing out on when you don't build dependence around you? What are you missing out on when you don't sink the roots down deep into the earth and say, I'm not leaving? I think you're actually missing out on most of what we find meaningful as human beings. So I take that seriously. But at the same time, I'm also like, there are so many other possibilities. What could be done? I would hope that things would continue without me being here, for sure. But I don't think we've yet got our processes to the place where that would be able to happen. It's ongoing.
And do you think there's something about the matching of being here in Canberra and this space successfully working and operating? I've heard it from some other people that I've talked to, thinking, why isn't there a Praksis in Melbourne? Why isn't there a Praksis in Sydney? And some comments are sometimes like, I could never work in a Melbourne or a Sydney. And I wonder, why is that? Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. Is it something about also being a smaller city here that makes something like this possible? Or the type of people that come to live here in Canberra that makes this possible? I mean, Melbourne's got 20 times the amount of people than Canberra. So why wouldn't it be possible is kind of the questions that I ask. But maybe from your viewpoint, because you were born and raised here, is there a certain quality that exists within the community that makes this kind of possible? Or is it possible anywhere?
I think Canberrans can do anything that's in Canberra easily. You know what I mean? It's almost like a misnomer to just say, Melbournians, that's a category. It's like, well, what if you live in the complete north, I live in the southernmost point? Are we actually in the same group? That's not so clear. Whereas in Canberra, I feel like if you live in Canberra, and someone else lives in Canberra, you're both part of the same city, you're both in the same town, really, genuinely. You know what I mean? So you can get anywhere here in 20 minutes probably. And the traffic's bad, it's like, oh my God, 25. And that definitely helps. But I don't think it's necessary, because why not have whatever your little part of Melbourne is, why couldn't there be a facility there that's serving those people? It doesn't have to serve all of Melbourne. I think it's like, it takes one or two people to just say, we're doing this. We're so desperate for approval, recognition, immediately, straight away. I'm trying this new thing. We want people around us to go yeah, go you, man,
Yeah.
doesn't happen because everyone's stuck in their own bubbles. They're all focused on their projects. It's like, well, no one cares that. So we got engaged recently, my partner and I. I don't think I told you about that, but she's walking around with her ring on and going like, why isn't anyone mentioning it? You know, walking through the shopping center and going like, can't they tell? Like, I just got engaged yesterday, you know? And that's kind of what we're like with our projects. Like, don't people care? And it's like, no, actually, they don't care. So there has to be something driving you that's deeper than that from the beginning, where you just go, no, I really believe in this thing that I'm doing. And the approval, you know, the recognition, whatever, the accolades come or they don't come. But if you genuinely believe in it, then you just keep pushing and you just keep going and you just keep exploring and see what happens. Like, I don't see why that can't happen anywhere. And we have people come. It's not that there's a huge population of people who are interested in movement in Canberra. My question before we started Praksis was, are there people it's not just are there people in Canberra who want to train the way that I'm training, move the way that I'm moving, but are there people in Canberra who want to live the way that I'm living, you know, and want to come into a space where we can have genuine, honest conversations and interactions where there's just no bullshit between us, you know, there's less of a filter where I can just be myself all day long. Are there people who want to live that way? And that's a broader question, and there are. And I told a little story about that when we had our 3-year anniversary, and a couple of the students came up to me afterward and said, we didn't know that that's what we wanted, you know? We just came because we saw, this looks like fun, this could be something different. But now that it's part of our lives, we can't see our lives without it, you know? We didn't know what we wanted. And so if you as the person trying to build the community, you're also a bit unsure and they don't know, it's like, no one really knows, and it's very hard to get behind that. But we know this, right? Like, when we see someone really going after something and it looks like they're doing it for the right reason, everyone just wants to help. Everyone just wants to support that. And they'll get around it even if they're not interested in it, you know? In the particular material, the particular content, that superficial layer, there's something that we see when someone's just going after something and putting all the eggs in that basket, that it's hard. I feel like if you're doing it for the right reasons, it's hard to fail. It's hard to fail. Yeah, you just don't know the scale, and that's what I don't know, the scale of what we could do here. Maybe my destiny. Maybe you start tomorrow. I'm going to start a facility in Melbourne, and maybe your destiny is to help 30 people, but help them in profound ways to completely transform their lives. You know, and maybe those 30 people whose lives are transformed by you, maybe they all have 3 friends whose lives then get transformed because their life was transformed. And now you've helped 90 people, and that proliferates out, right? But then maybe Ben starts a facility tomorrow in the Central Coast, and he's supposed to serve 300 people, and you don't know, like, most of that's out of your control. You don't know the scale of the benefit that you could provide, and maybe it's just for you, you know, like we said earlier. But if you go into it with that passion for benefiting, for providing genuine value, and for criticizing yourself and paying attention and going like, am I really doing it for that reason? Am I doing this for the right reasons? Constantly asking that and trying to reorient in the right direction. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I think I am. No, this thing is not. Okay, don't do that thing. Being genuine and sticking to your guns, then the thing becomes what it was supposed to become. But if you're questioning the whole time whether or not it's supposed to become anything, it's an ego thing, and it's a concern for the appearances thing that's stopping you. You know, what about all the other people in my life? What are they going to think of me if I try this thing and it fails? Who cares, man? Who cares?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about in terms of like when you're really seriously committed about something and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, then there is some strength in that, right? Where you can get people rallying behind you. I remember a few years ago where I was just committed to quitting my job and, you know, riding across China and Japan. Sounds absolutely crazy, right? But just in the conviction of how I knew that that was what I was supposed to do. No one really questioned it. They were kind of like, oh, that's really exciting. That sounds like really amazing. You know, quit full-time job, everything like that, into the unknown.
Right.
But just in that moment, that was right for me. And so I had just supporters rather than detractors.
Right.
And I think that was, it was a really special time.
Well, no one knows, and that's the thing to always bear in mind. No one knows what should be done, definitively. No one knows what you should do definitively. I don't know what I should do definitively. And that's liberating. Because then, well, if we can't rely on that, this clear knowledge about what everyone should do individually, which is like, that's the source of most of our suffering. It's like, we don't know what to do. Yeah. My dog knows what to do. You know what I mean? The cat knows what to do. The bird knows what to do. We don't know what to do. It's terrible. But it's also exciting and liberating to truly embrace the fact that people don't know. Because then they'll just, you go with something with conviction. It's like, no, we really do. I think we should definitely get sushi for lunch, And then like everyone you're with is like, it's okay. We're getting, unless someone else has a really strong conviction for something else. Yeah. It's this weird thing. You just go at something with confidence, and self-assuredness, and people follow and people get behind it and they go, maybe they start going out in front of you and go, yeah, come along. I think you're right. This is the right way to go. But you need also to question from time to time. And that's something I've really missed this year. We were talking about earlier in this weekend about not being able to get out of Canberra, not being able to go to the retreats and the workshops and the events that I would normally go to. Because that's when you get the perspective and you go, man, I'm charging forward, but it's in the wrong direction, So it's more like you need to get from Canberra to Melbourne. And first you just got to figure out how to get out of Canberra, and you start going this route. And then you look at the map and it's like, oh shit, we're not going toward Melbourne anymore. And you start going in this other direction, and then you recalibrate and you recalibrate and you recalibrate. But you're not changing direction every moment, The difference being you don't know where you're going in your life. It's not, Melbourne's not at the end. It's just this endless journey of recalibration toward I don't know what. But I think there's an instinct we have in us for that just nudges and says, for me, it's been like, okay, we're at the point with the handstands where spending more time working on them is not benefiting anyone. There's a nudge, and it happens during the session. I'm kicking up and I'm about to do a hold, lift off onto one arm, and I'm like, but I could play the piano. Like it happens, man, it happens. And that nudge happens enough that then you have to listen to it. It's not a laziness. It's not procrastinate. It's not that. It's like, no, there's something in you that's saying, this energy could be better spent elsewhere and would be better and should be better spent elsewhere.
So talking about like the class schedule and what you have available here. So I saw up on the board there, you've got the upper body strength, lower body strength. We unfortunately this time didn't line up so that we could experience those, but experienced the handstands and experienced quite a few of the movement practice sessions. Do you view the attendance of being at the movement practice sessions as almost like quite essential for a lot of the students? Because I think when I compare, if you just compare it by name only with other sort of group fitness classes, you would see a strength or mobility these days, that sort of thing. But movement practice, you don't see that. That's the new thing, right? So I wanted to get your perspective on the importance of movement practice as the class here at Praksis and its availability for students, because I'm pretty sure that not all students go to the movement practice classes as well, but what you think about its importance for the students.
I don't think it's fun. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's essential. So strength mobility classes, they're about addressing deficiencies and increasing general potential to do anything physical. Yeah? If you're not mobile enough, that's going to prevent you from doing certain things. At a minimum, it's going to prevent you from being comfortable. We're sitting here and it's like, there's enough hip mobility that I can sit here. I've changed positions and of course you get uncomfortable, but it's not, I don't need a chair. And that's thanks to some degree of mobility, right? And then same thing happens with strength, with time, with age, where the strength can be a limiting factor for the things that you'd like to do. But I'm totally happy if someone's doing strength and mobility classes to serve their rock climbing you know, and the weekends they go and rock climb every weekend, or they really love hiking and that's their activity, or they really love dancing and that's their activity. I think it's important to do things that aren't just preparatory, that aren't just increasing potential, because who cares about how much potential you have if you're never using it, right? For me, in my mind, that's how I distinguish them. We have a series of classes that are about increasing general physical foundations. They're physical foundations classes, they're increasing your physical potential. And then the movement practice class is about exploring how that potential could be used and realized in different ways, in different qualities, different states of being, different modes of operating and engaging with reality. But people can get that from a boxing class as well. They might not speak about it in the boxing class in that way, but if you have a little bit of that terminology for yourself and a little bit of an understanding that perhaps you would box and learn to box for reasons other than getting good at boxing, then totally you can learn those things from boxing. But if someone was just doing the preparatory classes indefinitely, I'd be like, you're missing a big part of it here, you know? It's like preparing the house for the baby, but not forgetting about, well, we got to get pregnant. You know, we don't have the baby, but the house is ready. You're missing the whole point. But of course, if you only realize potential rather than trying to increase it, if you only express the potential you already have, there's also a ceiling, right? So if you never, and we get this as well, usually it's the discipline types that love process that will come and do the preparatory classes, because it's very measurable. I couldn't do a chin-up, now I can. I couldn't touch my toes, now I can. Blah, 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 right? And then the artsy, you know, free-form types who always want to talk about their emotions, they will come to movement practice and maybe shy away from the other structured classes because they don't like discipline. And I mean, I say you don't like discipline, you should add some discipline and see what effect that has on your life. And you don't like not knowing what we're going to work on in class tomorrow, so you're not coming because you might be ashamed or embarrassed because you couldn't do it, you need to come desperately, right? Or at least you need to go and try something else. Go do jiu-jitsu, try something else that you can't do. So I think if you're missing those elements, yes, you're missing something, but whether you're getting them here or not, you know, we had someone who was coming who's been in the military for a long time and was like, I don't want to do the discipline thing. I'm doing that, you know, I'm doing that at my work. It's like, totally, that makes sense. Totally fair. Come to movement practice. Let's do that. In terms of how I deal with that in the beginning, I just say, whatever you're interested in, come. And you need to see that you can change yourself, that you can have an experience of self-transformation in any domain. And I don't actually care at all what the domain is. For you, it might just be, you didn't realize you could commit to coming to class. And you realize that you can add something to your life that you care about. That's a huge experience for someone who's not had that in a long time. When we've had a few parents recently, mothers in particular, and we know this about mothers, right? We spoke about this in the car as well, how they can sacrifice everything to the child. You know, that's what happens. And we've had a couple recently who are now reorienting toward themselves, and that's a huge leap. The material doesn't matter at all. It's like I'm paying attention to myself and reinvesting in myself and what's good for me. And that's going to be better for their children as well, you know. It's just the timing and everything. But yeah, that's a huge transformation. And I care about that. If they're going to do handstands or not do handstands, do movement practice, do my movement practice, it doesn't matter, as long as they're getting some benefit and seeing some growth.
One thing that I really enjoyed about the movement practice sessions, which I really noticed, was this lack of correction with the technical details. I know we did some with the stance works because you brought us through this tactical play class, at least at first, but then afterwards I noticed that a lot of your cues was really about increasing the sensations or the experiences of what was happening. At that time, we were playing this game where we were swinging the ball with the pendulum, and I think we were trying to stay close to the ball and avoid it with our hands and our body motion. And when you were going around, I think you said to me, it wasn't really about how I was standing or any of the technical stance work that we did before, but it was more like get closer to the ball, be more in the game. And I noticed this with both the classes you took and then also Sochi's class, that was kind of the difference, I think, at least from the handstand class and probably what you may be doing in the strength and the mobility class as well, was it was a lot more freeform in that way. And so, yeah, do you have this conscious change in teaching styles from those other classes to, you're like, okay, this is movement practice now. It's going to be totally different to the way I teach the other classes?
It depends on the material. It depends on the project. Because sometimes in a movement practice class, we will have, maybe we do 3 months of working on, say, acrobatics or something like that. Maybe that's one of the projects in the class. Then there are correct ways and incorrect ways of doing the movements that we're working on. If there's not an incorrect way of doing the movement, then it's more open in the way that you're describing. But so the thing is, right, there's no right or wrong way of moving. Yeah? But there are right and wrong ways of doing certain movements. So if I take the free form approach to back squats, we're missing something. Injuries likely, the chances of the person just figuring out the technique themselves with no previous experience, and perhaps they're especially, it's not disembodied, but they're not moving very much prior. I mean, you're just going to injure them. So that's the wrong approach in that moment. It's like, no, I'm going to be a completely very hard taskmaster telling you exactly what you're doing wrong and exactly how to do it correctly. And when you get it right, it's like, yes, we did it. And when you don't, we don't pretend that you got it right. Yeah, sometimes that's required. But then in other times, it's for you to discover. It's your self-discovery. And I don't know what will come out. Like maybe we're playing that game with the ball on the string and you have a better way of resolving the problem than I've seen before or that I've used before. And if I just limit it to my experience and the ways that I move, then you will never develop your potential. You're just developing a version of my potential. And that's a very effective way of keeping myself at the top of the hierarchy and keeping you paying and coming back. But if I genuinely am orienting toward your potential, then that's not a very effective way of teaching in every instance, you know? But I am very intentional about this is a moment where these are the things that I want to see happening. And it might be that your feet are moving in a particular way, or it might be that your visual field, your visual system is operating in a particular way, or it might be that you're breathing in a particular way in that drill. And that's what we're focusing on. All the different angles that you can come at the same thing can be useful, can be beneficial. And it's just figuring out which is the most important right now. What's the priority? That's actually hard to determine. And I think that's what becoming a better teacher is. It's about figuring out what's the top priority, what's the most important thing, rather than just saying, here are all the things I know about the thing you're trying to do. Aren't I great for knowing them? You know, like here's a thing that I think will be the most useful. Effective cues, right? Effective cueing. That's what you're working on. And sometimes it might be that I introduce a task or a scenario with a certain intention in mind, but I don't articulate that clearly, so that doesn't emerge in the group. And sometimes the thing that emerges in the group is actually far more interesting than what I had in mind. And we can shift. You know, I taught that movement practice class yesterday morning, and it wasn't my intention that the class would be focused on this concept of broadening, expanding your awareness, but that unfolded within the class. That became a theme. And because I noticed some people not doing that and other people doing it well. And then I was like, well, what drills could we introduce? What could we add in that I hadn't planned that will allow us to explore that further? So it was more of a bottom-up class plan. And that's really fun. That's also really fun and engaging, that creative process as the teacher.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about your preparation and your process, because in both the classes it seemed that there were certain moments where I was like, did he plan this? It seemed like quite improvised, like based on the discussions that we had, we were talking about, you know, the coordination of certain actions in mind and in body. And then we did this game where we were trying to get close to the person, you know, tap on their chest whilst avoiding the ball, whilst reciting a story, which I found quite challenging at first, but it was very interesting. And then after that, Ben and I were discussing, we were like, you know, where did that come from? Like, did he have that on the paper beforehand, or it was just plucked out? And then how does that change, or how do you pivot from that then? Because that takes time within the class as well. And then maybe there is some other material that you want to cover. So maybe, take us through how you prepare for a class and then adapt to change during that class based on what you see and what you hear from students.
It depends on the class. Let's just use movement practice, because the others are much more planned out. Where if I'm going into, say, a mobility class, we have programming. So all the teachers will teach the same. If it's a 60-minute class, they'll teach about 30 minutes of the same material, and they decide what to do at the start and at the end. And in those situations, I'm normally going in with quite a clear plan, maybe a little bit of openness to what we'll finish with, depending on the energy of the group. In a movement practice class, it varies a little bit. Like you want to know what you're starting with. So I'll have something at the beginning planned. And normally I have a series of drills in mind or written down, perhaps. Usually what I've been doing recently is I'll teach 3 movement practice classes in the week. For the first class, I have more of an idea in mind for what it's going to look like. And then that unfolds within the class a little bit. And then I'll write down what we did. And that's my structure for the next class in the week. But I might adjust that. And what I'm aiming at is for the 3rd class of the week to be the best possible version of the first class. Or it might be that we follow the same sort of structure for a class for 2 weeks in a row. And in that case, the 6th class would be like the best possible version, the best possible iteration of class number 1 that could be managed in 2 weeks, in a 2-week time frame. So I'm trying to make improvements. I'm not just like, this is how it's going to be done. For the first 2, probably even first 2.5 years of my teaching, that wasn't the case. This is the plan. And if we need to rush to fit everything in, we'll rush to fit everything in. And I think you kind of do have to work like that in the beginning. It's very hard to just start with the guitarist has to do his scales before he starts improvising. What I do now is, notice, is there something I'm looking for in the quality of the movement that's coming out within the class that's lacking, universally? And if there is, are the tasks or drills that we're using the best way to address that? Or is there something that pops up in my mind that would be better? And if something pops up that would be better, I try that and see if it's better. And if it is better, it kind of goes into the plan for the next class. So there's a skeleton, there's a structure, there's normally a plan for how it's going to start and how it's going to end, and a little bit of openness along the way to how far, how much do I need to explain this thing today? Maybe we need to go through something for 20 minutes in one class, and the next class it's all the same people, or you can see immediately everyone's getting it straight away. That quality that we struggled with in Tuesday's class is completely there on Thursday. So I don't need to insert that drill, or I don't need to go on the rant that I went on Tuesday. And there's a little bit, it's just awareness that you actually really have to pay attention to how the group's responding. And I've seen this, right? Like we're doing straight arm strength work. Everyone's arms are straight. And the teacher's like, straighten your arms. And everyone's arms are already straight, but you're just giving the cue because you know it.
Yeah.
What's going on there? Like you actually have to pay attention and respond. But that example was, we were saying, what we could do is occupy the mind by doing this. And I said, well, let's just do it. This is perfect. Let's see if that works, rather than just talk about doing it. So it's a balance. Yeah, it's a balance. It's a bit of both. And that's a really fun, engaging. I feel more engaged when I'm teaching in that way. Just like we spoke about, what are we going to talk about in this conversation? And I was like, I haven't thought about it at all. So it's like more exciting than if I know exactly what's going to come up and I've written out my responses. And I do think the more engaged the teacher is, it's very hard for the teacher to be engaged and excited and for the process to be unfolding for them and for the group to be bored by what's happening. Because it's not that the material is boring, it's the feeling of curiosity and excitement, which is kind of distinct from the specific drills that you're working on or tasks that you're working on.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you had that set plan and you know that you're teaching that for 3 or 4 times that week and you just do that exactly as well. It's kind of like your training program when you're, just grinding it out at times sometimes, because that sense of curiosity as well with the approach is nourishing for yourself as the teacher.
Right.
But it also sounds like as you said, you kind of have to play the scales or build up this vocabulary of how all these different wide-ranging tools may operate, so that afterwards, when there's a prompt or you notice something, that you go, oh, there's something in the bank there that
Right.
I've done before that I can try now. Otherwise, there's also maybe the risk that you try to do something and it doesn't hit that point, or it just falls flat on the face, right? If you maybe improv too much.
Right. But that's not necessarily bad. That's a learning for you. Like that's a learning moment for you as a teacher as well. All the best cues that I've come up with, they were just given once and worked really well. And so, oh my God, I'm going to hold on to that little bit of gold. And you're like, it's not really something you did, it's just something that the student did. And you're like, thanks, great. Now I'll use that. So they can all be learning moments. And I think it's nice to be, I have this dictum I try to live by: take it seriously without taking yourself seriously. It's kind of what you mentioned with the teachers becoming students in the same day. It's not the worst thing in the world for the group to see you make a mistake, or you're like reaching for an analogy and it doesn't come up. And that's just funny. It's like, that's completely fine. It's like, how important am I that I tried? Well, why don't we try telling stories and it doesn't work at all? And it's like, doesn't matter so much. Like I said, I think the group and everyone is more engaged. That's what really matters. If the teacher's going with that and pulling those threads, and they're there in the process being engaged as well and exploring in a way that might lead to failure or might lead to success. Again, just like this conversation.
And when you're designing these classes maybe a little bit beforehand in your head, when you're going like, okay, I want to approach this certain topic, we all know Ido's phrase, isolate, integrate, improvise. And my sort of perception of some of the classes was we were kind of doing some maybe drills beforehand that led up to, I loved it, a lot of the partner work as well, which for me was kind of like, okay, now if we dove straight into some of the partner drills, it would have, I wouldn't have connected maybe some of the movements or the new options that you explained to me before. So do you actively think about a framework such as that, or this like adding layers of complexity to this final end goal of like working with a partner or improvising with it for the movement practice class?
Yeah, there's got to be a clear intention. What are we aiming at as a group in this class? And that might be a particular final task, a particular game that provides a context for the rest of the class. Or it might be, we didn't do this in the mobility class the other night when you were here, but the week before I said, today the purpose of this mobility class is to feel better today, right? Because you do some things that'll make you feel better later, some things that don't really make you feel better at all, but are somehow good anyway, right? We all know that. Like, I don't feel better doing the dishes, but it's better once they're done. So you can't just be hedonistic with your practices. But we said today we're just trying to feel better. So we'll just use all the material, like as much material I can squeeze in 60 minutes that'll make us feel better. And at the end of the class, people feel better. Great, it worked. Contrast that with the class 2 days before, where I said today the focus is resilience. We're just working on resilience. So what's that look like? 30 minutes of crawling without stopping. And do we feel more resilient? I mean, maybe you don't in that moment, but you feel like you have more potential or more capacity for resilience. So it's a bit of what's the context? What am I trying to develop? Is there a particular game that we want them to succeed at? Or is there a quality or a state that I want the students to access, to engage with? And then it's just piecing together the elements for making that happen. The thing is, the game or the context is always serving some other attribute as well. And then again, being awake to, I taught similar material on Thursday night to what I taught yesterday morning, but there were certain things like the feet were not moving how I would have liked to have seen them move. So we did a little bit more foot-specific stuff. Or the shots, we were touching the partner and trying to be snappy and elastic with our movements, and they weren't as sharp as I would have liked them. So I tried to add in, well, what if we add in a vocalization when we shoot. That was a new addition to see if that helps. And I think it did. Okay, next time we'll use that again. Yeah, but it's not just we're doing this for fun. Sometimes we'll do that. Rarely, but I might just be like, today's class is going to be fun. We're just aiming at fun. But an hour and a half of fun is like, it's almost too much fun. Like, it's like too much to just be like, it's too long to just, you can't laugh for an hour and a half. It's too much. There's a different type of fun, right? Different levels of fun or different versions of fun. But it's not mindless. I don't like that. I want to know that if you ask me why are we doing this, I've got a good answer. I won't do something if there's not a good answer. Yeah.
And how do you deal with if someone is like uncomfortable with some of the material? Because in, say, like Soshi's class, there was a drill where we had someone's head in our hands, and then we're guiding them like as a bit of a spinal or body organizational practice through this space as you held there, and they were supposed to let go with their head in the hands. And coming from COVID as well,
right.
that it's quite amazing to see, and it's also a very powerful experience when you give into it. But I think, what if someone really objected to that? They were new to the class, or maybe they weren't so sure of themselves, and they were just like, I don't want to do that. Have you had experiences of that? And if so, how did you manage that?
Yeah, I have. It's not super common, but whether they say it, we're not the best at saying, particularly Aussies, like saying what we're not cool with. We kind of just want to go with the flow, So they'll not be cool with it, but they'll do it anyway. But sometimes people say, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. And in that moment, I want to figure out why. And maybe they don't actually know why. So I'm trying to figure out why they're resisting this thing. And I'm also trying to be as aware as I can be of what's the purpose of the thing we're doing. If the purpose of the task is for them to let go and allow someone else to decide what's happening in the movement, I can't just have them do spinal waves instead, because if the purpose is to move the spine, I can have them do spinal waves instead, no problem. But if there's something about that specific task that I'm trying to help them access, that isn't just free movement of the spine, mobilizing the spine, then I need to see if I can draw something out of the toolbox that will allow them to access that. I used to be a bit more like, either do it or fuck off, like a little bit, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, well, this is what we're doing. A bit more, not aggressive with it, but just like hard line with it. But as I've tried to, like I said, we've been talking about through this conversation, more clearly orient toward what will benefit that person, that requires more of a sensitivity, right? And it might be the person who's resistant to anything, to the combative games, which you do get resistance to, they need that more than anyone else, right? It's like the old thing, if you feel like you don't have time to meditate, you're the person who needs to meditate. So they really need it, but you just got to go like, what's going to get you there? How can I get you there? I had quite a powerful experience with a student a while back who came along, and she had a bad car accident many years prior, got rear-ended, had severe whiplash, and had been a dancer prior to that. And she couldn't extend her neck. Like, this much extension would have been a problem, couldn't do it. And we were doing that game in the first class that she came to. And we would mobilize the spine a little bit with some spinal waves against the wall before that. And we were trying to do spinal waves, and she couldn't extend the neck at all. And she was breaking down. She was crying through it, like, this is trauma stored in the body, right? It had been a traumatic experience that had really negatively affected her life that hadn't been dealt with. And I was just there saying, just do the smallest one. Just try to extend a tiny bit. It's okay. Just, like a mother would to a child. Like, I think you can do it. Let's see. Can you do it? Can you do it? Not like, just do it, but being gentle and seeing if she could work her way through it. And then we finished, and she knew, this is something I need to be able to do. I should be able to do. And I knew that. And so I said, well, just practice this. Do 10 minutes of that drill against the wall every day. Let's just do that. We couldn't do this. you know? And then we played that game a little while later. And she was letting go a little bit, but as soon as I went into a little bit of extension, I didn't go like, extend your neck, you know, it was just like a little bit, there was still a strong resistance, right? And that's okay. I was like, okay, we'll do other things. We'll explore and see if this can become possible for you. And then maybe a year after she had started with us, we played that game again. It just happened in class. And we ended up being paired up, and she was just moving completely freely and beautifully. And it was like, it was an amazing experience for me as a teacher, and I know it was a very emotional process for her as a student. And if I'd approached it in a harsher way, it wouldn't have worked. That wouldn't have happened. Maybe she would still feel exactly how she felt in her body before that. Maybe she'd still be in that situation now. But now she can dance and play with her spine and look at the sky and do all of these things, just because I managed to do it properly in that moment. And there've been others where we've tried to do partner work, where maybe someone's had domestic abuse and they don't want to be touched in that way. And I haven't had the energy to be present for them, you know, and I've been too like dismissive, and they didn't get that, you know, and that's disappointing. They could have got it. So it's like, how do I feed you this thing? It's like you give the dog medicine and you put it in a little treat, you know? It sounds kind of crude, but you don't just go, no, just eat it. You have to find a way to deliver that to them. And that's really hard. It's really hard, but rewarding if you can manage it. And big lessons can be learned when you don't manage it, when you mess it up.
And one thing I noticed about your communication style when addressing the group especially, was being able to relate through analogies, and they were normally quite humorous as well. So has that also recently intentionally developed within, maybe afterwards you go away and go, oh, how am I relating to the students? And you're like, oh, this is a better way, because yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I noticed that after each task, drill, whatever we did, there was always a little bit of a discussion that you led, and it always was about relating it to something about like normal life that everyone could relate to, such as that, oh, do it like that's how your mother is watching you, or something like that. So maybe, yeah, bring us through a little bit about how you're thinking about your communication process with students and the use of these type of analogies to explain points, which maybe that's what you use to bridge the gap between physical practice and wider life.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things going on. Like, it's funny, it was an intention that I clearly set. I think it was an intention I set last year to like be funny. I think I wrote it down as an intention for a resolution. Yeah. Here's what I'm gonna aim at. Because I've always loved joking around and always been like a humorous person, but I had drained that out of my life with that monk mode that I'd gone into with the discipline, you know, like, no, life's a serious thing and you should take it seriously, and you should take it seriously. But that doesn't mean I need to take every single moment seriously. And a laugh is such a relief, you know? Maybe we are doing something that's challenging for you. And there's that tension that comes with, there's a necessary tension that comes with trying to go beyond what you're able to do. And you can release that so easily with a joke. And there's also that, like, no matter how much I try to reassure people that they're not gonna be shamed for not being able to do something. And that there's not like, I'm this important person and you're below, you know, that still kind of develops anyway. And they might come in with that, and you just like trying to let them relax with humor, you know, it's all good. We're all here, and I'm taking the piss out of myself. Like, and I'll take the piss out of a student if they're like, if we have that relationship, and not someone brand new, you're not getting a hard time, you know, it's, so it's a diffuser. It diffuses that tension a little bit, gives you a little bit of a break, and then you can go back into it. And the stories, the connection, I am trying to, it's not, partly it's trying to use those. So I had someone come in and she was having back problems, back pain, chronic back pain. And she's got children. And she was treating her back pain as something like, she was mad about it, frustrated with it, which people in chronic pain, you are, right? It's frustrating. I've had that experience. And she was like shitty with her back for being in pain. And I said, I mean, you've got children, why don't you just treat it like a child a little bit? Treat it like one of your children, where like it's not doing the thing you'd like it to do, but being shitty with it is not gonna help. You know, why don't you, I know you nurture, so why don't you nurture yourself? She was not taking care of herself the way that she was taking care of her children. And it became not a stop feeling pain in my back problem, it became a caring for my back problem. And that analogy from her life fed into the practice really worked. She's not in pain anymore. And it was like problems for years. It's like a very quick solution, partly with some useful tools and perspectives, but mostly with that shift in how she was approaching it, I feel like. So that can happen. You're feeding in something from life to the practice that works for the practice. And like you said, I'm also trying to say, hey, this practice works in your life. And here's somewhere where it might work. Maybe you try, and hopefully it doesn't always happen, but I know it's happening a little bit. They see that. Oh, this is a moment where I need to like diffuse my awareness and broaden my perspective rather than zooming in, and allow all of the factors to arise together, like like we spoke about, looking at the forest, not the tree, and just see what emerges and resolve the problem in that way, and it works. Plus it's more fun, and you know, I don't orient toward just fun as it's not the top thing, but why not trickle it in? Why not add in a joke if it pops up for me? And that silly, like, be funny again, you know, resolution. There's just way more joy in my life now because of that, and other things that have happened, but because of that, like levity, you know, because it's a heavy thing we're in reality, you know, it's heavy being human. You don't need to add to that all of the time. And humor is this amazing tool we have to just go like, for a moment, to just let go of that. And then maybe you go back in and it's heavy again.
And how do you think about energy and managing energy throughout a session when you're going in beforehand and when you're observing? You know, do you always, I liked how at the end of several of our sessions we came together and it was like this communion kind of discussion, but then, you know, we did this jaw relaxing technique, which was amazing. And then there was another one where we just kind of massaging our foot as well. So is your intention at the end of, say, like a movement practice class, that everyone should be walking away feeling more energized, or should they be feeling like, oh, like we did some work? What goes through your head when you're going, okay, like I'm going to take you guys through this class today. Where's the energy level going to be at during the class and at the end?
That's a little bit more like surfing a wave again, because you can have all the intentions you want, and the group might be in a different place from you, and then you're trying to force them into, no, this was going to be a high energy session, but they're feeling low on energy, and you're just sapping them even further by trying to get more out of them. In other situations, you might come in a little bit low on energy, and it's like, oh, we'll just go through it, and that'll be fine as well. But the group's like a bit amped, and then you get brought up by them, and that's what unfolds. So it's not completely up to me. It's not completely up to me as the teacher. Part of it also is like, it's not inherently bad to be low on energy. If you're sleepy and you get to go to sleep, it's a really good feeling. You know, the feeling of being tired, if it's the right time for being tired, is a really, really nice feeling if you just pay attention to it. But if I'm tired now and I've got to drive to Melbourne, you know, it's like the worst possible thing that could be happening. So you can go through the practice in a low energy state and be like, oh, it's a little bit low, and you acknowledge it, and that helps people go like, actually, it's fine for it to be low. But yeah, generally I'm like, okay, we need to, depending on what people have come from, first thing in the morning on a weekend, I mean, it's not that early, 9 a.m. start, you can pretty much just get after it. People are on their weekend, they're in that mode anyway, you know. 7 p.m. mobility class, maybe they're already a bit tired from the day, so I don't want to start with something too relaxing, because then there's nothing there for the session. So it might be, okay, meet them where they are, yeah, that same concept as before, slowly bring up the energy a little bit, and then just being aware of what's coming up after this. Probably going home, maybe having a meal and going to sleep. Let's bring it back down so we can make that possible for you. That's normally the structure of a session for me, but it just depends. Maybe I'm teaching 2 in a row, right? So we might finish the first one quite high energy. And if someone backs up, perfect, because we'll bring it down at the end. But maybe if they don't, they have to deal with that problem on their own. That can happen. But I don't think it's not good and bad energies. It's just different amounts of fuel or different kinds of fuel that you're burning. And it's fine to be in either of those extremes. Or I try to avoid being too much in the middle, too much just like neutral. Because we spend so much of our lives in that oh yeah, I'm kind of in this conversation, but I'm also thinking about my plans for later, and I made this trip to Canberra, but I was distracted and was doing and you guys have been great with that. You've just been here, and you could tell that. So you're fully in on it. And yeah, I do think that many of us are spending a lot of our lives somewhere stuck in the middle where we're never reaching full aliveness and full output. And we're also never going into full relaxation. So I, depending on the duration of what's to be done, try to get towards that full, I'm fully alive, and then also, fully relaxed. That feels good as well.
And I think that's the power of being guided by a teacher and being surrounded by people who are doing it all together as well, because then you reach these new heights or these new lows or bottoms that you wouldn't have done if just by yourself. Ben and I beforehand in Soshi's class, we were doing the fighting monkey, like the standing practice, and you're expanding with your arms out like this. And, we said afterwards, it was like, oh, that was the hardest thing we did all weekend, because all you're doing is I want to give up after I'm just holding up my arms. But then afterwards, it becomes such a powerful experience because you come back down and you're like, okay, because I had to push through those limits, I became aware of the narratives that were going through my head and comparing myself to other people, or that I was just like, can I do it or can I not do it? And I wouldn't have experienced that if I was just had that task at home and I was like, okay, I'm going to hold my arms up for X amount of minutes. When it started sort of getting painful, I just would have been like, okay, I'll just put my arms down. Yeah. So.
Yeah, talk about not orienting toward fun. That's that's a good example of that. We had that with the river, the session by the river as well, right? Where that's why I like going to those things, because so much of obviously I'm teaching, it's a group situation, but my practice outside of when I'm teaching, and I do join in and I'm developing in class as a student as well, learning, but most of my practice is done alone. So that's partly why I go to those sessions with that group of guys, to just get the energy from the group.
And just as a recap for the listeners, this is, we wake up 6 a.m. in the morning on the Friday, and I love how you guys have specifically chosen for it to be on a Friday. It's not like any other day, normally when everyone is winding down or they're looking forward to a drink on the Friday night, right? And we made our way down to the Cotta River on the banks there, where there was a group of people with very large rocks. And I don't know how much time we actually spent there, but we did a whole manner of different high intensity things. That's what I'd probably describe it. It could be just the simple task of doing push-ups, but we're going to do 1,000 of them at a high intensity. Right. Yeah. And it was very much about facing discomfort head on. And it was a really great juxtaposition, I think, to this whole trip, because, here in this space, we're thinking about things, I don't want to say, more intellectually or more in a different...
It's more cerebral, the way that...
Whereas that was just it doesn't matter how you just do it, you just got to do it, and you got to do it hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those sessions are awesome. And so they started doing those, I think, at the start of winter. So 6:30 a.m. start, in the dark, below zero often, freezing cold. And I did the last day of winter so I could squeeze in on having done one in winter. But those guys are working on that. They're working on resilience and toughness together. And I've only joined in really in the last few weeks. I've done a few in a row recently. But it is nice to go into that mode and remind yourself, it's Ben and I spoke about it afterwards, how if you just say, well, I'm not going to stop unless I have to stop. The point, I can't think of a time where I had to stop in my life. I can't think of a time where I couldn't have done one more of whatever the thing was that we were doing. Like, our actual resilience is insane, but our self-perceived resilience is like so low compared to how much, how much we can tolerate is far higher than how much we think we can tolerate.
Yeah.
And I like those sessions for that in part. It's just funny to say, like, to now be talking about it cerebrally, but given the like just brute, it's like a brute strength session. That's the best way to think about it. But I do like that about that. Plus, it's an easy way to see those guys, and I really like them. They're friends of mine, and we don't catch up as often as we could. And I think it's a good sign when the things that you're doing to spend time with the people you care about are things that you're really engaged with as well. So going there and we leave and we all feel like more alive, and you got energy for the day, even though you spent all this energy, like doesn't make any sense, but you feel like, woo, ready to go. And to do that with people you care about, that just pushes you on. Like, there's no suggestion that someone says, nah, that's a bad idea. You can just, you just get after it and shut that narrative off.
Goes back to this concept, which I really love, about doing meaningful work with meaningful people or relationships that you have. And then every time I've done that, you walk away with feeling more energized.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, it doesn't make any sense because we like to think of ourselves in that mechanistic way of, well, if I put out 1,000 kilojoules of energy during this conversation, then I'll be 1,000 kilojoules lower in energy at the end of the conversation. And that's bad. So I need some fuel, right? But we just don't operate in that way. It's much more this like whirring up and whirring down together. It's not a zero-sum game, our energy output, our energy expenditure and consumption. And I think that's a great way to measure. I spoke earlier about the intuitive, like listening to the voice that says, hey, I don't know if you should be spending your time this way. Or, it's like your conscience telling you, I don't know about this thing. It's a good sign if you're finishing things with more energy, like, that gave me something. That instinct for, the instinct for that is like, it can be a compass for you. I try to listen to that if I can.
So I wanted to touch a little bit on just one final thing on the class running, which was like, there was one class, the handstands that you were running, and I think there was one new girl that joined us as well. And so how you manage like newcomers. I mean, Ben and I have been newcomers, but I guess we've had some sort of training experience before. So maybe it might make it easier or harder for you. I don't know. But like, you guys don't really have an onboarding process, do you? Like, people just joining on the class and then you go for it.
Yeah.
So what goes through your mind when someone new steps into the class? How do you manage that? Because they're completely new to the space, the people, the material, there's a lot going on. If you're launching into, I don't know, like handstand kick-ups as well, sometimes people like fall over and kind of hurt themselves, right? So what goes through your mind?
There's actually quite a lot there, Someone's decided to come and try something new, and you've got to respect that and acknowledge that that's happened. Even that can be a huge relief for the person. Because I've gone and done things like joined in on jiu-jitsu classes, and there's no acknowledgement of like, I'd never done any wrestling. Like, I'm kind of terrified of this. How does it even work? And there's no acknowledgement that you're going through an experience. So someone new comes in, you can kind of gauge. Some people are just super excited and you don't really need to go through this, but lots of people need reassurance and they want to know that they'll be okay and that they'll be safe. And so I just try to welcome them and have them feel like they made a good decision, and to be like a little bit proud of themselves. Like, you did it, you're here. Because I don't know how many people don't get to that point who want to, but I think it's a lot. So often we get people come in and they're like, I've been following you for 12 months and now I'm here. It's like, so how many moments of, nah, not today, were there before they made that leap? So it's a little celebration just that they're there. If there's a new person in class, I'm able with my energy now, with the way I've got my life structured, to just try to make every single class as best as I possibly can. Like, I can really put energy in. But for that new person, I want it to be an experience that they're just like super stoked with and guaranteed to tell someone about. Something that you can't not share with the people around you, that sort of an experience, even if it's full on, you know, even if it's not good, if maybe they're not stoked about it, maybe they didn't really enjoy it, but it's something they're like, oh, I did this thing. It's like, this happened to me, you know, the story you pick from your day at the end of the day when you're debriefing with your wife or whatever, that's their story, you know, for that day. And then when we're going through the content itself, that's a whole other process of figuring out where's this person at, how much can they deal with, how much can't they. A big part of that, again, is just communication. Like, hey, look around, the people who are all already able to do this, they've been working on it. And you're gonna get to that stage. And we all start where you start. And that's completely fine, because you're just trying to like, it's almost like you're going through high grass. Yeah, there's an uncarved path and you're just trying to cut away the start so they can see like, there's the beginnings of a journey here. There's the beginnings of a path that I could follow. I'm trying to give them that a little bit, like, yeah, there's something here. There's something that's worth pulling on. There's a thread that's worth pulling on. And part of that is, this maybe is the final thing, me not being too desperate for them to come back. Because then I'll change what we're doing. And if you do that for 100 people, now you've got 100 people in your facility, in your studio, who are there for the wrong reasons. And now it's not your studio anymore. So giving an honest, genuine portrayal of what actually is involved. So say they're here for their first handstand class, then I'll say, look, in the beginning, the process is, it's a lot of preparation, and it's a lot of alignment work, and it's a lot of figuring out the positioning, and it's not a lot of the thing that you're eventually going to be able to do. And if you're not up for that, that's cool, but you probably won't like it here, you know? Being honest with that and using that to filter, because there's a little bit of a filter, like a funnel, that they've come through to get to their first class. And then all I want to happen in that first class is that if it's for them, and sometimes it's for them, sometimes it's not for them now, but it will be later. You know, it's a timing thing as well. But if it's for them now, they need to leave that first class knowing that. Yeah? And if it's not for them at all, okay, they should know that. They shouldn't think it's for them and be wrong, because that's not good for anyone. Maybe it's good for the bank account today, but in the long run, it's a bad thing. So that's kind of what I'm angling at. So there's a lot going on, you know, and I try to follow at the end of class and communicate and just like welcome them in the most honest, genuine way I can, where we're continuing to build the kind of culture that we want here.
Awesome. Well, that was all the questions that I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know what you guys thought. Like what I'd like to know is, you're coming in and you have expectations, right? Like, what are the things that you were right about? What are the things that you were completely wrong about? Is there anything you were like you know, I was hoping it would be like this, but it's a disappointment. I'd be curious to know if that's if that's a question that you're able to answer.
Yeah, because
how are your expectations matched to reality or not?
Ben asked me this question before day one, before we were going to walk into the studio, about like, oh, what are you expecting? Like, how are you feeling? How do you want to approach this? And I answered him just saying that, like, I'm trying to approach it with, open heart and open mind, and drop the expectations and just let whatever it be. But I guess there always is that sense of perception beforehand of like what's going to happen, you know, the anticipation. Oh, I'm really excited. I've been waiting for this all Melbourne lockdown to come to this place. Right. But I think that through the material that you've shared online, it really has been like quite a good, for my perception of it, like a good, accurate representation of the work that you do here. Because for anyone listening, like, they definitely should check out like your YouTube channel, the website, all that sort of stuff. You know, you got these follow along routines, you got these stories of the teachers that are there as well. Maybe the sense of the community aspect and how aligned with the values everyone is, you can't get that through an online medium, and that's what I'm always surprised at, because then you can work with anybody here, and then within a minute you could have their head in your hands, right? Right. And then afterwards, when you walk away, you're like, oh, like Gary, I'm really connected with Gary now, because we work together in this drill, and then afterwards we can talk in this no bullshit way, which is kind of you know, you're checking in on what they're doing within their life as well, but there's this sense of familiarity as well, which is really, really nice.
They can like genuinely answer you because
yeah.
they let you move their head around. Yeah, I like that.
Otherwise, yeah, I didn't know what to expect for what was going to happen within the movement practice classes, and that was what I was really excited for the most. But then even in the way that you guys approached the handstand classes with an emphasis a lot on like the dynamic work and working with partners, I really, really enjoyed. Can't say I was disappointed by anything. So it was just really great being in the space, you know, and embodying being in the space. And I think you guys do an excellent job in reminding students as to where that awareness should be placed. And I think there is a strong emphasis on that within all the teachings, whether it be the discussion afterwards or the physical task. It's like, okay, like, you know, it's not just the physical, like we're doing this, yeah, it's going to be hard or whatever, but I've done this before, but it's a little bit different, if you know what I mean.
Is there anything, and maybe it's a question for tomorrow or for a week from now, but is there anything where you're like, I'm definitely going to make this change, I'm definitely going to take that thing away when I get back home? Is there anything that you would take as like that's a clear change to make immediately or soon? Or a new path to set, or whatever, you know, if there's anything, like I said, maybe it's an unfair question for today when you're still in it, you know, you're still here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there are some physical tools and tasks, scenarios that I'll take away and play with, which I'm really looking forward to playing with, with my partner, because the partner work was especially one area of the practice which I felt, you know, during lockdown as well, was kind of prohibitive.
It was so wonderful having her join in as well. I didn't know the extent to which that would happen, so that was great.
It was really, really nice.
Yeah.
As to the qualities and maybe some orientation, I have to reflect. One thing that really stood out was Simon's emphasis on this working through fatigue, but not through grinding it out fatigue, but by like letting it go and happen in the body. You know, the springiness, this dynamism within the body by just relaxing into fatigue. I thought that was a really powerful message because, again, I could see him embodying that concept. So that's something that I'm really interested in trying throughout all the things that I do, to be like, okay, recognize maybe I'm feeling a little bit tired or there's a bit of resistance there as well, but instead of just going, I'm gonna like smash through it, can I just work with what I have and just sloosh myself into this work?
Yeah, can you feed the fatigue into the practice? Use it as a tool rather than as a impediment, right? Simon's, I mean, it helps he's got a young child, so he's like actually very fatigued and had this Ross River thing going on, so it's like genuine. Another one of those, this is a life lesson that we're learning by playing capoeira. You know, pretty cool.
But otherwise, I think what I mainly take away from this is that I'm inspired to share movement more to a more like broader scale, such as like you have done as well, because I can see the change that is happening here. Like everyone is so engaged, everyone was so full of life, you know. And sometimes when you go into some workplaces or some areas where you're engaging with people, they're not really there, right? It's like the classic response when you go, oh, what did you get up to on the weekend? It's like, oh, not much.
Not much, right.
And that's it, and you're kind of like, and then you're kind of sucked into that energy as well.
Yeah.
And everything that we experienced here was really like, everyone was present, everyone was energy providing, and I think that was really, really great.
Cool. Oh, I'm glad you feel that way, because that's what I want. That's what I want in my life, is for as many moments as possible to feel like that. To feel like, man, I'm really in this, and so are you, and we're in it together. And that's just, I don't know what else you could aim at, you know, that's just like, that's a good, it's a good top priority,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Cool, I don't have any other questions, I think. I should have thought about it more earlier.
Well,
earlier. Is there anything else you want to share or anything you've been thinking about?
I'm all questioned out, I guess we had a really nice discussion again.
Yeah, I think we've had a good chat.
Once for today, you know, for all those watching and listening in as well, you know, take a look around at this space, check out Tom's work through the website, YouTube, Instagram, all those sort of things, because I think there's a lot of content that you share for free as well that people can experience as well. And once again, maybe if anyone wants to get in touch, you know, all the details are on those locations as well. Flick us an email, reach out. Maybe we can have a conversation. We'll see where things go from there. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful, wonderful weekend. Eyes have been opened once again, and I think that's sort of it. I'm just really appreciative that, you know, you opened the doors up for all of us to experience. Hope you enjoy this break for the Christmas and New Year's. Take some well-needed rest. I will after this trip as well. Yeah. And then hopefully in the future, you know, we can keep on experience new things together. I'm really excited about that. Yeah, I love that. And thanks for coming. Like immediately when you guys arrived, there was an added energy. So is this a representation or not? Like you've brought something as well with you, right? So that conversation around energy, you were feeding energy to the group and they were feeding it back. And it's added life to the last few days as well. So you're always welcome, and I'm just stoked that you made the trip and that we got to have these sorts of interactions. So thanks for being here. Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Awesome. Nice. Nothing was recording. Wouldn't be the worst thing, you know. It's like a lesson. The only one thing that I was thinking was like halfway through, I was like, I didn't start it off by like a clap. Oh yeah, the synchron. Well, we could do it now, right? Oh yeah, well. Just sync. Yeah, that'll sync it at the end. Okay. I think? Yeah. I don't know. Awesome. Oh, now I can feel my legs from yesterday. Oh, can you feel yours? Yeah.